Welcome to We Digress with Joy and Jess. Join hosts and longtime friends Joy Simpson and Jess Perry as they tackle the stuff of life the only way they know how, with honesty, faith, and humor. This is We Digress with Joy and Jess. Hey everyone, welcome to We Digress with Joy and Jess. I am Jess, and normally at this point in the show, Joy would pop in and say that she is Joy, but we ran into some technical difficulties with this week's episode. Unfortunately, we don't have about the first 9 minutes of this week's episode recorded. I don't know what happened, technical difficulties. So let me recap what it is that you missed. We're diving in. We recorded this the week after the Tonys aired, so we're talking all about the Tonys. It's not really what the episode's about, but we can't say no to some good musical theater discussion. So we talk about the Tonys. We talk about some other performances. Joy goes on like a little detour, a little digression, if you will, about the Tina Turner musical and the lady who plays Tina Turner and some thoughts that she has about that, mostly related to not quite sure that her arms were toned enough to play Tina Turner, but I don't really know. I don't have a frame of reference. I haven't seen the lady that plays Tina Turner, so you let us know whether you think her arms are toned enough to play Tina Turner. I think it's mostly vocals and wig, but what do I know? Like I said, you missed the first 9 minutes of the episode, so we're going to dive right in to where we pick up, again, continuing in our Tony conversation, and hopefully we'll get those technical difficulties worked out for next time. Thanks for listening, guys, and now back to our regularly scheduled programming. I started to watch the Cheno and Dina Menzel duet, and I gotta be honest, I love me some Chenoweth. I love me some of her voice. But over the last couple of years, she annoys me, actually. She feels super fake.
I think because now she's being typecasted in everything she's in. As far as, I won't say as Broadway stuff, because I don't know how that's going. But other regular people things I've seen her in, they typecast her as that Galinda type snotty-ish person.
Right. But even when she got up on stage to start that song, because I did see the first 15 seconds of that duet, but it was almost really kind of fakey emotion was the vibe I was getting off of her, and I'm like, I don't know how I feel about it. That's just me.
I say watch it and then
I think I'm projecting.
Tell me what you think. Yeah, I was going to say watch it and tell me what you think. Because I actually thought she was genuinely emotional because they haven't, Broadway's been closed for almost 2 years. Her and Adina haven't worked together in a lot. It was a lot of feelings and things going on. So I think she was genuinely
Well, and I think when Wicked reopened on Broadway, I think she did the welcome on opening night. I'd seen a clip or something of her, doing "It's Good to See Me," isn't it? Which, come on, how iconic.
Yeah, so I get where you're saying, because I have had that feeling and I just hadn't expressed it to anybody because she can come off that way, I think, lately. But I think now it's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
and you never
the performance is definitely worth watching.
Oh, I will for sure do that, because you know how many thousands of times did we sing that song in the car in college?
Right. So I was telling my mom, I was like, because my mom thought for whatever reason I sang the Kristen part, and I was like, no ma'am, I don't care what song I've ever sung from Wicked, it is always Adina's part.
Right. And I don't know how that even started. I think it just was we just started singing in the car one day
after college. I performed it with Jam and S. I performed it for some variety shows we've done. I sang it at my uncle's wedding. My uncle's funeral. It was a wedding of sorts, I guess. I don't know how that was gonna. That was not theological. Don't quote me on that. Please don't. I was just trying to make it work, but it's not working. Right. But I sang it. I think I sang it after at my uncle's service, and then I sang it a month later somewhere because somebody requested that we sing it. But I've always done Adina's parts, even on any song in Wicked. That even when you and I were just in college, just chilling, I always sing Adina.
Yeah.
I don't know how that happened.
And I don't know either, because in college you were singing, usually you were soprano.
Yeah.
And I was singing alto.
Yeah.
But when it came to Wicked, I always took the soprano part.
You
Although
did.
Adina is like, it's everything. It's all of the above.
Yeah, she's kind of an
Adele
alien
Dazeem.
when it comes to things.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, so I was just watching, we were packing up and trying to like edit out like our closets and stuff, and I was just watching the making of Frozen 2. So it was kind of interesting. Speaking of Broadway,
Interesting.
there's Jonathan Groff is in Frozen, the Frozen
In
franchise.
summer.
Right?
He's my favorite.
Oh, no. Jonathan Groff.
Oh, you
is
said
Olaf.
Jonathan Groff, not Josh Gad. I'm sorry.
Yeah, not Josh Gad. They're both in there. Lots of Broadway people. But Jonathan Groff.
Yes.
So I was watching this clip, and they were showing video of him recording. He's got that like awesome like 80s Chicago song, not Chicago the musical, Chicago the band. It's got that like hardcore Chicago vibe. And it's a great song, but I was watching the recording of it, and of course you're getting the raw audio, like it's not been adjusted or anything like it, and I was like, Jonathan Groff, you were a little pitchy. I'm like, was this like, are y'all like fussing on this to get it for the documentary? Is this not the real take? I was like, I have questions. But it was cool to watch all that kind of stuff. But yeah, maybe I'll take a look at the Tonys, because at least the clips.
I mean, because
that's really all I care about.
Yeah.
I'll wait till it goes on YouTube.
I love Leslie Odom Jr. and
oh my gosh,
I was a fan of his before Hamilton came out on Disney Plus. You know what I'm saying? Because there was a lot of people who just now knowing who Leslie Odom Jr. is, and I'm like, I've been a fan.
He has a couple albums out, but he had an album out. I want to say of Standards. Was it Standards? Yeah. Oh man, I just finished.
It's not that old either. It came out like a few years ago, maybe before.
Yeah.
Post pandemic. We're not there. Pre-pandemic. I don't even know. We're in pandemic part 3.0. Anyway, that is not today's subject.
3.0, 4.0. I just finished listening to an audiobook that's like the history of Hamilton, like how it got written and how all this kind of stuff. And I took it from the library, just listening to it on audio, because I had a whole bunch of like data entry to do at work this week, and I needed something to
keep you
just
stimulated,
be listening to, so I didn't go crazy from the monotony of inputting so many students. But it was fascinating listening. Yeah, I'll have to find what it is and link it in the description, because it was just like really, really good.
That's really cool.
I in fact messaged my friend Ashley. I was like, you should listen to this, because she's got a kind of a long commute, and I'm like, you would dig it. But it's pretty cool. It talks all about it like highlights each of the main actors in the show, kind of like a little bit of their story and how they came into it, and like what they contributed, and talks all about the all about like how he started writing it, and that first performance at the White House, and how it kind of went from there. It's
I've
really
seen that
fascinating
clip so many times, and the more times I've seen that clip of them at the White House, the more story I learn about it.
Yeah,
it's like, because it's been in different arenas.
And this gives you kind of like the whole backstory on it, and it's amazing when you listen to it. You're like, what the what? Like, that's crazy. It's not.
Yeah. I think
like
the first time I really heard. Yeah, what was that? Was it the last Super Bowl that President Bush was at before he passed? Right after he had pneumonia, there was a Super Bowl in Texas. And the Schuyler Sisters opened with was it God Bless America or the national anthem? One of the two. And I was like, the Schuyler Sisters, and I was tripping because I'm like, hey, what's her name from General Hospital, the one that plays Angelica.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, they can really sing. So after that's when I started digging more into Hamilton the musical and more who are the Schuyler Sisters. And I like history. So all of that just makes it's history, it's music, it's multicultural. I love it all. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I know people who have their issues with it, but I think it's a great show. And Manuel Miranda did a great job.
Oh, yeah. It's funny because I tried to listen to the soundtrack first. And this
Mm-hmm.
is very interesting. So I listened to it without seeing or knowing anything of it. And I had a really hard time following what was going on. And I realized I'm elderly now, right? So I
Not I'm elderly.
well, but in the book, this book that I just read, they talked about how they mixed the cast recording and how Questlove like had a whole hand in
Mm-hmm.
mixing the
Mm-hmm.
whole album and all that kind of stuff. But he very specifically, instead of having like a 60-40 vocal backgrounds mix like a typical Broadway show would have, it was
Mm-hmm.
very much like a 50-50 mix. So the
Mm-hmm.
vocals were sat down into the band, the accompaniment,
Mm-hmm.
which is a great audio sound, but I'm trying to catch lyrics and they're fast, right? And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what's going on. Like I missed entire
Yeah,
plot
you definitely
points.
have to
Like you
yeah.
have to pay attention. And so I think the first couple times I tried to listen to it because everyone was just raving about it. And I was like, maybe this is just not for me. I'm going to be one of those people that's like recalcitrant for the sake of being recalcitrant. But then it came out on Disney Plus and we watched it. And I was like, dude. About the first song that I really, really loved, of course, was Groff's "You'll Be Back," which I love me a
You'll Be
good
Back is hilarious. First of all, that's my
funny
mom's
song.
favorite character.
Oh yeah,
And we were when we went to see it. So I had been listening to the soundtrack because I heard about it and I saw the
right.
Schuyler sisters at the football game and all that. So I was like, so I had been into it. I didn't have that experience like that you had. So I guess my elderly is a little different than your elderly this time because from the first part, boom, 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 I was like like I was there,
That
and
opening is
then
solid, man.
when my aunt called and was like, what are you doing this afternoon? And I'm like, I have a concert later today. Like, what's up? Oh, can you be late to your concert because we're all going to see Hamilton today? And I was like, wait, what now? We're going to do what now? So yeah, my aunt Rebecca for Christmas 2 years ago got us all, her
Wow.
5 children included, my mom, my grandmother, my uncle, Hamilton tickets for Christmas that year. It was like 2 weeks before Christmas.
Oh
And it was the
wow.
matinee performance, but still, for that many people.
Oh yeah.
And we had like fourth row orchestra seats. Like I
Oh
was
dang.
right there. Like you have I was bam. And then to put their whole actions and stuff with the soundtrack that I've been listening to
Right.
forever. Like me and the kids, my cousins, we would all be like in the kitchen, because I'm not throwing away my, and this is before I'd ever seen it.
Right.
So when we saw it, I was like, if this isn't the best musical, and for me to say something like that, because I'm a Wicked fan, I am a Ragtime fan, I am an Aida fan, I love all,
Oh yeah.
for this one to be up in that top like bracket, I was like, just the way, looking at the way the turntables on the stage were, how they were literally throwing their costumes at each other, but made it so seamlessly. And then you're having this mixed genre of traditional
Oh yeah.
Broadway mixed with hip hop and some other stuff. And I was just like, this
You've
is the
got to
best show ever.
you've got to listen to this book. You would love it because
I'll
it's
listen.
all the back
Definitely
stuff.
send me the link because I totally would love that. I'm the chick that still has her grimoire from Wicked. Like my uncle Larry, when Wicked came out, he got me. It's a big
I
green book
still
of
have
secrets.
mine.
It's every. You still have yours too?
I still
Yeah, I
have mine.
totally still have it. So that's the
Oh
kind of thing that
gosh.
I would totally love. This is so not what we were talking about tonight, but
No. No,
this
we
is kind
have a
of how I am.
topic,
We
but
do.
Tonys, right?
But the Tonys, absolutely. And it's kind of
The
been one of those weeks, though
Tonys.
we often say it's been a week. Like, today really has been a day.
Today has
And
been a
this,
week.
yeah, today, because we're recording this on October 1st, 2021. So by the time you see it, it'll be at least within a week or two. Today has been a day. I mean, today has been a week. Today has been a week and a half, and this week has been 2 weeks. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's been
Mm-hmm.
one of those ones. And coming back from out of town
Mm-hmm.
into the week that feels forever is just like crazy. But
Yeah.
and the
Yeah,
Tonys, and I love the
it's
Tonys, and I will never apologize about talking about the Tonys.
Broadway for life.
Like, we're literally cooking in the kitchen in Texas, and I'm like, It's 26. The Tonys. I call my mom. My mom's like, girl, I thought something was wrong with you the way you was. I was like, mom. She was like, are you serious? And everybody is at the house looking at me like, when we were in Texas, I was visiting my god sister for reference, and we had like a big family dinner type situation on Sunday, and we're all cooking. Well, myself, Rodney, and Sam cooked, and that's hilarious within itself. If you are my friend on Facebook, please go to my regular Facebook Joy Simpson page, and you will see videos that says random food moments with Rodney. And when I tell you, it's worth it. There are a couple things I should have recorded, and I couldn't get my phone fast enough because he is crazy. And tomorrow he's leaving for London.
Oh, wow.
He and his nephew and his nephew's girlfriend or something. They're going to London, Amsterdam, Scotland, I think he said. And then he's going to come back home, and the nephew and his girlfriend are going to go on to Italy and Paris.
Oh, wow. That's
Rodney
cool.
is that guy who he's like everybody's uncle. You know, he raised two of his nephews actually as his children. So he has a really adorable granddaughter, Bella. But all of his uncles, I mean, nieces and nephews, even great, I've met them all. They all love him because he's crazy. I think that's what it boils down to. His niece commented, like, my uncle is nuts. I'm like, yeah, he is.
Everybody needs a crazy one.
Right. Yeah. So we were cooking, and I'm like, call my mom. And everybody's like, you did not call your mother to record the Tonys. Yeah, I did. Like,
What?
you all met me?
Hi.
Hi, I'm Joy. Nice to meet you.
Right.
What?
Yeah, that's
Good
funny.
times.
That's funny. We do have a topic today. It is surprisingly
We
not
do.
the Tonys. It's a little bit probably heavier, so maybe
So
the
this probably was
levity
good.
of
We started
Tonys
with
is good to start off with. But one of the things that has been kind of a recurring theme for both Joy and I over the last, over the years of our ministry, really,
Yeah.
and before, is church
Yeah.
hurt. And we've kind of
Yeah.
talked around some of our stories and those sorts of things, but
Yeah.
we unfortunately, for better or for worse, the two of us have we have a perspective on church hurt, and we've been through
In
it
both sides. Yeah.
on both sides. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, we have a perspective on it, and our hope, I think, with today's episode is that we would talk about church hurt, but more importantly, that we would kind of give a framework, because we recognize that, we love the church. We love the body of Christ. We love just being able to be a part of the kingdom and all that entails. However, just because you love something doesn't mean you don't recognize that there is
Issues.
there are issues, and there are imperfections, and there are problems, and it can cause pain anytime you get people together doing something. So we're going to talk about church hurt today, and just kind of our experiences, and maybe
We'll try not to be so heavy.
right. We'll try to keep it balanced, but more importantly, more than just rehashing our own church hurt like a therapy session, although there's going to be plenty of that, I'm sure.
Pretty sure.
Is like how to approach it and how to move past it. Because that's, I think, the hardest to me. That's been the hardest part of it. And this has been a unique season in that too. So,
for sure. And I find that we are definitely not alone. And there are definitely two takes on church hurt, and I've heard people minimalize it.
Yeah.
And I've heard people also put it to the point where it's an excuse to not be in relationship with God anymore. And unfortunately, some of his people have, and it's not that I don't validate either. I'm just saying those are the two opposite spectrums. So like she said, we have a very unique perspective because of being in ministry, but also we've been on the side of hurt, and we've been on the side of the blame of the hurt. At least I know for sure I have. So, and there's lessons in both of those things. Again, I don't want anyone to feel like we are minimalizing either one, because all of it is valid. All of it is true, and all of it is going to help you make a decision regardless of, anything. So, and I've actually I've had this conversation a couple times this week with various people, just out of the blue, not anything like we were like, let's talk about church hurt now. Like, it wasn't like today was a business call. It wasn't even about any of that. It was totally a business call. And she also knows my god sister. For those of you who are listening, my god sister Tramika is in ICU right now. Hopefully, by the time this airs, she will be home and doing well. The person I was talking to on the phone, she knows her as well. And so I was just letting her know what was going on and for her to pray. And I knew she would pray and things like that. And so she was telling me, I also want you to pray for me. And she told me a couple of different things. And then she said, by the way, I'm also leaving the music and I'm leaving my church. And I was like, what? Like, back up now. What happened? So, not to tell all her business situation, she and her ministry, not just specifically the pastor, but the pastor has had a very large hand in a lot of things. She didn't grow up saved. Let's say that. She didn't grow up in church. She didn't grow up in ministry. She actually brought her mother to church as as an adult. And so, she's had some struggles off and on with different things. And so this is the only church that she's ever known. This is the only church that like known. Like, she's been to visit other places. This has been her home. And she has also, this is where she learned to work in ministry and how to get involved and all of that. So I know that this decision for her did not come very lightly. And long story short, they've had an up and down situation. We've talked about some things, and God has allowed me to counsel through the Holy Spirit on some different things that I think is how we got here. Because one of the things that I asked God to do is illuminate her eyes to the decisions and the things and the people and the situations that she needed to illuminate her, so she would see on her own and not people telling her or manipulating her or whatever the case may be. So, God does it how he does it. We don't really know how he's going to do it. So he did it his way. So she's had some up and downs. And so she said a few months ago, the pastor was putting his political views out into the ministry. And they were talking about some things and talking about how people who've gotten vaccinated are going to die within the next 3 years and some other different various things that she felt completely uncomfortable about that she overheard in this conversation. So she addressed him. One thing I will say about her, anything that she had an issue with anybody in ministry, even after I would talk with her and pray with her, she would go to the source. She wasn't one of those people that would be like, well, I'm going to talk to 10 different people and then I'm going to try and get to pastor. No, she would say, hey, I need to make an appointment. I need to talk to you about XYZ, regardless of what the result was going to be. So I do applaud her, because everybody doesn't have the confidence or the courage to do that, especially when it comes to someone who is in a pastoral leadership role. So she addressed him about the situation that he said and some other things other than the dying thing. And she is vaccinated, and I'm sure she won't have an issue with me saying that. And she is vaccinated, and so she's like, you know that, and for you to say that and you're joking about it and talk about people dying and how we are being played by the devil and just a bunch of different stuff, right? So much more that I'm just not gonna say. So he told her, you're right. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have put that out there. I shouldn't have said that. We shouldn't have been having this conversation in the church. This is a private conversation that I could have had on my phone. As a pastor, I'm not supposed to force my political views on people. It's just to give them the wisdom and tell them that, talk to God, whatever. He went through all that. But here's the thing where I immediately was uncomfortable, but I'll let her finish her story. He told her not to tell her husband that they had that conversation. And I was like, huh? Because his response was, I know your husband will make a rash decision and not come back because he feels like this isn't the place to share that type of situation. So she agreed that she wouldn't say anything to her husband. So I was just like, I'm not married, but I'm going to shut up. So she continued the story, and then she said, like, a few weeks later, he was actually preaching a sermon, and he started talking about abortion, but she didn't have an issue with that. It's just the way he brought the abortion situation into the vaccination situation and made them similar, kind of a thing. And this was during service over the pulpit during a sermon, and the husband was at church that Sunday, and he was like, what? Like, I don't even think this is, again, he also didn't grow up in church. She brought him to church. So, again, you got a lot of variables going on in this situation, right? So she tells me that she addresses him, and his response to her was, "What did I do now?" when she called. And she said, "You promised on this such and such day about a month ago when we talked that you wouldn't do that." And I'm not saying, she's like, yes, it is your body, your choice, but what you're doing is making people who are making the choice feel bad. And I don't think that you as a pastor should do that. And just some other things that she just got off her chest. She was like, "You're right. I wasn't really saying my views. Nobody knows that's exactly how I feel. They just know that that's what I'm saying." She said, "No, everybody in the church knows that these are your actual views. And that's not even the issue. Your views are your views. So she said something about her husband, and she was like, okay. She said something about her husband, and he was like, "Well, I never told you not to tell him. That was your choice." And she said, "No, I distinctly remember you saying that you asked me not to. My daughter was standing there." So, long story short, that conversation did not go well, and some other things. And now she is leaving the church. And the things that she said to me was this: "I've now experienced church hurt for the first time." And I said, "I can hear it in your voice, so I'm going to say this. Do not allow that seed of church hurt to grow, because what that seed does, and I'm telling you from experience on my own and from counseling others, what happens is that seed turns into bitterness, and you will become very hard-hearted at not only ministry but the things of God, because it's a very, very, very thin line. So if I were you, I'm telling you now, because I hear it in your voice." She's like, "Well, I need to find a ministry." Yeah, you absolutely do. But that relationship between you and God is what's going to help you release that. And you can't walk into another ministry expecting the pastor and the people to be the same, because they will not. Now, no church is perfect. Absolutely not. It is run by humans. You know what I'm saying? But I felt that it was important for me to tell her, because I've seen that bitter seed of church hurt ruin people's lives, turn them to not just not being at church. I've seen people get into drugs and alcohol and things like that, like severely, because of the things that they've experienced in church and in ministry and by church people. And so I was like, "God, thank you for allowing me to say that to her, because I don't want her, who is so open and wanting to know so much about God and his ways and how to run by his Holy Spirit. I don't want her to become hard-hearted with him, you know." So then we scheduled a meeting for the following week. But I wanted to tell you that because I was just like, I had forgotten that this was going to be tonight's topic. And when I checked the schedule earlier, I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." And I just had this conversation with her before, so.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think the common theme in church hurt is this sense of betrayal that you have
Mm-hmm.
when you are coming out of a situation where someone who is in authority, or someone who is in a position of being, when you have someone who is your spiritual counselor, your spiritual guide, someone that you have placed that level of trust in, right? Because that is a weighty thing. Like, for someone to sit under the authority and the teaching of another person, you have to
Mm-hmm.
have a modicum of trust, right, with
Yeah.
that person.
Mm-hmm.
And so to then have somebody in that role and in that position who was supposed to be your shepherd, who was supposed to
Yeah.
be your guide, who is
Yeah.
supposed to care for you, suddenly betray that relationship and betray that, it's very jarring, and it kind of, I think, goes to the core of our faith, because
Mm-hmm.
in many ways, and I will say this, I know that there are a lot of people who tend to put pastors on pedestals, and there are a lot of church traditions that sort of expect that pastors would be on pedestals, and
Mm-hmm.
they are
Mm-hmm.
above question or above reproach.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can just kind of speak into that, if you are in a situation where you're not allowed to speak truth to power, so to speak, with your pastor or with your leadership, if you're not allowed to question anything that they do or say, that's unhealthy,
I absolutely agree.
you know? And I say that as a pastor, as someone who would routinely get, connection cards with all kinds of stuff about I didn't like this, I didn't like that, I didn't like this.
Yeah,
And
you've
that's
taken a lot.
right? Because I've been in situations where the directive was change, and people don't like change, and that's understandable.
Right.
But as a pastor,
Right.
I also recognize that those questions and those gut reactions come from a place of fear,
Fear.
so you
Mm-hmm.
can deal with that. But it's never one of those where I know best and I'm not willing to hear it and I'm not willing to examine myself on it,
Yeah.
because and we'd kind of talked about this in the episode that actually releases today on the first, talking about pastors who um don't are concerned for pastors who have prominent positions, because it's easy to kind of get that big head and easy
Right.
to
Right.
have those kind of thoughts. And so all that to say, if you are in a situation in your church where you're not allowed to question the pastor, or you're not allowed to come to them with concerns, or somebody in leadership, that's not healthy. And that's a
Right.
problem. That's a
Right.
cult.
Mm-hmm.
Um, right. Um,
And we're not saying fight the power as in like just constantly bombarding
no.
leadership with every little thing. But if there are some genuine like concerns, I mean, even about the finances, I don't know, every church ministry and denomination also have their own bylaws. But to me, when it comes to tithes and offering, I feel like we should be able to
Mhm.
ask questions when we are seeing things allocated to different ways. And again, I've from experience in different places, that's a question for me. And I think sometimes the body of Christ, we feel like you said, we have these leadership rules and traditions that makes pastors feel like, and not saying, again, this is coming from a perspective of someone in ministry, that we place them in a place where we kind of just blindly follow in a way. Like we take that shepherd sheep situation to heart. Because one of the things, not to heart, because we are, but to a place to where we're letting things go that we're seeing. And
Right.
or we're not questioning certain things. Or if you're telling you that we're spending $10,000 a month in community, which fundraisers, where are we actually allocating, these things to? And it's not just funds. There's so many different things, but that was just the first example I could think of right now. But one of
Right.
the things that my friend I talked to earlier said was, she was like, one of the things she said to him was, "You're the shepherd, and I'm the sheep. So I followed. I did what you told me to do, and now this is where we are, because now I've had to also tell my husband that I knew you had some issues in regards to this topic, and appropriately speaking about it with the congregation a month ago. But I followed you, and you told me not to say anything to him because you didn't want him to make a rash decision to leave the church. And I should have known then." And so, yes, we are to follow, our pastors are our shepherds and things like that. But when you're not sure or you're feeling something, you have the opportunity and the right to not just pray about it, but actually vocalize what it is, and don't. And if you're in a marriage situation, again, I'm not married, but if my pastor told me not to tell my husband something, no
Mm-mm.
matter how big or how small that was, I personally would
Mm-mm.
think that that's not,
That's inappropriate.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of issues that I have with that, cuz here's the thing. If that
Mm-hmm.
pastor knows that that conversation is going to be a stumbling point for her spouse, like, then that needs to reflect on him. Why is it a stumbling block, and why is it a problem? Not that he should change what he says to please people, but it should be a guardrail to say, what am I saying? How am I communicating it? And all this kind of stuff.
Right.
I I had a very interesting conversation with a friend of mine at work who's also a pastor, and he's doesn't work in ministry vocationally anymore, but he teaches and stuff like that. And we were talking about um a situation where we had at one of my churches, we had a pulpit team. We had kind of a
Mhm.
deep bench. We had 3 or 4 of us on the bench, which is kind of rare for a smaller church. And we were doing a series of tough questions, that people ask about scripture. And I ended up talking, my message was on LGBTQ issues in the church.
Mhm.
And he kind of joked and goes, "Wait, they gave you the hard one, right?" And I laughed and I said, "Well, I kind of volunteered for it." And he goes,
Mhm.
"Why would you, that's an
Why
interesting
would
one
you
to
do that?
volunteer." And I
Mhm.
was like, I, to be honest, didn't really trust that I knew that this needed to be handled with care and with love and
Mhm.
compassion. And I wasn't certain, not that anybody else on our preaching staff would have been malicious in it, but I
Right.
wasn't sure that there was anybody else that was going to weigh every word the way I knew that needed to be weighed.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I like volunteered for it just because I was so concerned about that. And I think that there's a lot of pastors who don't stop to consider how they are communicating. Um,
Right. Because it can be also not what you say, it's how it's said. Or
exactly.
even if it's what is said, even if it is the what, it still goes back to the how.
Mhm.
Because if your view is your view, granted, I don't think we should, in the pulpit as a pastor, I would not, um, for me, I would not be speaking about how I felt about vaccines personally or any of that. What I would do is give the information that I felt my congregation would need to make a prayer based decision that is best for them. That's what I would do. I would not condemn people who chose to do or not to do. I would not be openly in my ministry where anybody can walk up and say, "Well, I heard the people that are going to get the vaccine, they're going to die within the next 3 years because what they put in their body is actually killing them versus helping them." Like, I wouldn't do that. That's just me. I don't know how you want to run your church. I wouldn't do that.
I
Um,
yeah, I got an email this week from someone that I have counseled on and off for a few years, and she had attended a church where they were no one was masked, and it was pretty clear that they weren't following really any guidelines or
mhm,
anything like that. And then they had someone who unfortunately got COVID and
mhm,
were in the midst of that. They said, "Thank you for your prayers after 24 hours after you started praying. Um, I didn't need oxygen anymore, and it was because of your prayers." And this girl she is exploring Christianity. She has a lot of concerns about it. She has a lot of questions about it. I think that she's someone
mhm.
who is tender toward the things of God, but all the PR for the church that she's ever heard, and I say the church, capital C church, the church of,
The
is
big church,
is yeah is kind of the church hates gay people, the church hates science, the church is all this kind of stuff.
right?
And so I had the opportunity to kind of push back on some of
Share
those
different.
things
Mhm,
and say, that's not the case. God created science. God is the author of our natural world. And so he is
mhm,
the author of science and church and scripture go hand in hand. And
mhm, mhm.
having these conversations about it and addressing the fact that she's like, well, they didn't talk anything about the fact that it was science that healed that person. And I said, well, true. I said, ultimately, for people of faith, um, we have this tension because we obviously believe in science. We think that science is great and wonderful, and it's
Mhm,
a way that we understand the creation that God has given us. But at the
mhm,
same time, we also know that there are things that are unseen as well as seen.
mhm.
And so we believe that prayer does change the unseen as well as the seen. And so
Right.
we kind of live in this duality of both. We trust in we use and love and appreciate science, but ultimately our trust is in the creator of science, not
Right.
science itself, right? Because we believe that there is something more to
Right.
just what we understand, that there are things beyond our understanding.
Right.
But the thing that broke my heart in getting her email was and there were other things in there, but it was really just this discussion of such a distrust of God because his people
People. Hmm.
were putting stumbling blocks
Right.
between her and her faith. To me, unnecessary stumbling blocks. And I think that, obviously we can talk about this in the context of on the church side of things, and we rightly should take churches and pastors and ministry leaders to task for putting unnecessary stumbling blocks um between people and God.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I think the purpose of our discussion tonight or today is really to say, look, this was the question that I ultimately posed to her, and I think this is the question that I ultimately pose to anybody that has church hurt,
Hmm.
is, do I truly genuinely believe that God is who he says he is? If I believe that God is who he says he
Hmm.
is, then I will do the things that he says to do. I will not do the things he says don't do.
Hmm.
Um, and I will trust that the relationship that I have with him is of primary importance. And I
Right.
will not allow other people's sin and other people's um, or even other people's, perhaps it's not even deliberate sin, maybe it's thoughtlessness, or maybe
Hmm.
it's unawareness, or maybe
Hmm.
it's ignorance, I guess is a better way of saying unawareness. um
I was with
Words are hard.
unawareness.
But I'm not going to allow that to get between the relationship that I have with God, because if he is who he says he is,
Hmm.
and I believe that to be true, and I know that to be true, then if I allow myself to get bitter or angry or any of those other things as a
Hmm.
result of other people's actions,
Hmm.
I have allowed something to get between my relationship with God. And
Makes total sense. Hmm.
that, I think that's the question that I put, that kind of frames my counsel around church hurt. And I think that goes back
Yeah.
to what you said too. You can't allow yourself to get bitter. And
Right.
the reason why is because there's something bigger than
Right.
this
Right.
church and you. There's something beyond
Right.
that.
Right. And it's interesting because I was listening and thinking, you know, as we said earlier, I've been on both sides,
Hmm.
and it took for the times where I was hurt by church people and church situations. Um, I did the very thing that you just asked. I it took me a while to get to the place where I had to look at, was my bitterness, my hurt, my irritation, my frustration worth what is going to happen, because God is moving this situation out of my life and I need to see it as God is moving it, or if God wants me to stay, or God showing me that people I don't need to be around, whatever it is. Should I look at it as a God thing versus a horrible thing, or a sad thing, or a hurting thing? And it took me a bit. I'm just, I think, finally, like, I can do this now. And then looking at the other perspective of the times where I will say I was to blame for someone else's church hurt, were also situations that caused me church hurt because I was put in the position to hurt someone else by someone in position. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so, one instance I can think of is my mom and I actually were just talking about this not that long ago. I grew up in a ministry where we talk about excellence. We went by the 5-star rule, um, for business in ministry, and what you find is that it does make certain aspects of hospitality and things like that more welcoming. So, um, we were in a place where we're having issues with the music department, and we were asked by the music department, was myself, one other person, and the MD was another person. We'll say Pastor L. They were the MD. The other young lady and I were the directors of music. So we did the band, and he helped. He was the band person and who we met with, and then he would disperse. And for the, I don't know if you guys have worked in worship teams and things like that. Anyway, long story short, we were asked by our leader, our pastor, to do auditions to re-audition the music department as far as vocals. Now, I personally didn't have a problem with that because there are people singing in sections that should be at a different section, or there are people who need to. I would always look at who should stand by a certain person, usually in rehearsals and in choir, because if they're not as strong as an alto, but this other person is really great and they are strong, I'm not sitting you next to them to feel bad. I'm not standing you next to them to feel bad. I want you to build up to where they are. Or another situation, I would put someone near someone to help them learn how to blend because they oversing someone. So I didn't have an issue with doing the audition. I was looking at that part. But then we were also asked to split the praise team into two teams, the A, B, and A team and the B team, which again, that's a very common thing at a lot of churches. I helped and subbed at churches that do that. So I didn't think anything of it. What happened was all of the quote unquote stellar singers ended up in group A. And then you have the quote unquote not so stellar singers. Most were still pretty good in group B. So group B is like, well, how come we're not in group A with such and such and such and such and such and such? And group B weren't, any of them weren't really worship leaders. All of the worship leaders were in group A. That is not how we originally wanted to do the team. But once we gave our suggestions and all of that, our pastor told us, well, I think you should put this person here and this person here. And then there was investments going into the other teams. There were outfits that was going into Team A. There were different things. So Team A is running, there's people running Team A, and the same people that are running Team A, which myself and the other person, we're also running Team B. And nobody on Team B really can lead, so we have to lead every week. So it's not giving us any relief. Anyway, so there was someone who was in Team B who decided to be vocal. We were in a church staff meeting. And so it was all the directors of all the different departments and all that. And one of the people who was also a director of a different department who was on the praise team, he basically went after myself and the other person about this Team A, Team B situation. And he's getting out all of his feelings. Do you understand? He's getting out all of his feelings. Mind you, I'm also younger than most of the people in either group. The person who was working with me was younger than I. So this person is maybe a little bit older than my mama. And they're literally yelling at me in a staff meeting. And their wife, who is not anywhere near the music ministry, is having her 2 cents put in. And I'm like, bro, this isn't even about you, but okay. And so the pastor says, well, can you all explain to me how this happened? And I was like, what you mean? Like, made it like they didn't tell us to do this or anything. The person who was the MD, he said, no, sir, I'm going to stop you right here. And he spilled all the church tea of the music situation in that moment, protecting myself and the other person and making them understand that we were not to blame. So then the pastor tells everyone to leave the meeting but us and this couple. And maybe a week or two later, he left the church. And within a week or so later after that, everybody pretty much from that Team B was gone from the ministry.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a story that I've heard told so many times.
Yeah,
I mean, in the details might be different, but the story is the same. And and I would say from a pastoral perspective that there are a couple of things at play. There is poor communication happening from staff, and there is just bad management happening from staff. Absolutely. But then there's also poor responses happening from both sides. No one has clean hands in this one. And I think that is often the case. We want our bad church stories to have a very black and white, right and wrong kind of good guys, bad guys. And the reality is that there's very often not. The hardest part for me in my most recent issues with church is
Mm-hmm.
understanding that I know I'm the villain to somebody else's story. Now, I don't quite
Right.
understand why. And from my
Right.
perspective, I know that I did uh, from my understanding my own motivations, I know that I was well motivated.
Mm-hmm.
Um and I have examined myself in a lot of things. And I know that I was not perfect. I didn't behave perfectly. May or may not
None
have
of us are,
said
you know,
some
not
rash
so holy
things.
things.
Said some rash things in a final conversation with my lead pastor
Mm-hmm.
at the time. Did he earn them? Perhaps.
Probably.
Should I have said it differently? Undoubtedly.
Mm,
Um, do I trust that God will do what he's
mend.
going to? Absolutely. um, I don't think I think the hard part for people who are in the church is it's like everything else. Church would be a lot easier without people.
For real.
You know, I mean, church would be so much easier if we didn't have to deal with any of these people. And yet, that's who we are called to serve and called to love.
Yeah.
And part part of our spiritual maturity comes with, I think, the more, put it this way, when we are spiritually mature, we
Mm-hmm.
recognize that not everything is a church hurt situation. That there are some things that need to be just dismissed because
Mm-hmm.
it's people not it's people being people and doing people things, and
Mm-hmm.
there are going to be unpleasant interactions, there are going to be differences of opinion, there are going to be different
Yeah.
perspectives, and there are going to
Yeah.
be different methodologies. That's a
Mm-hmm.
huge one, methodologies. But that doesn't mean that anyone is ill-intentioned, doesn't mean that anyone is
Mm-hmm.
in sin, doesn't mean that anyone is acting nefariously or with ill intention. It just
Right. Right.
means that people are people and people do different
Right.
things, you know?
Right.
And then there are seasons when there is persistent patterns of behavior, right? Where you see sin happening and things are not addressed, where there are those kinds of things. And then you get to be the recipient of that, of just
Mm-hmm.
ugly, bad behavior.
Yeah.
Um, and having sat through meetings where I was literally kicked out of a board meeting by the chairman of the elders screaming at me in front of my congregation members. And then to have him find my husband and my father and scream at him and both of them because how dare I behave a certain way. Um, Sometimes
Wow.
behavior is bad behavior. And
Yeah.
there are bad actors in church, and there are people who should not be in leadership positions in
Woo.
church. And
Yeah. Yeah,
um,
man.
and it has taken a lot for me in that specific situation
Mm-hmm.
to let go.
Mm-hmm.
And I still haven't 100% let go. um, and had a conversation with another expat from that situation not too long ago, and she said to me, how do I not get bitter over this? I think I'm doing better, and then it just pops up, and I don't know what to do with it.
Mm.
And my response to her was, unfortunately, this situation that we both shared is not my first go around. I have been
Right.
through this before in other churches.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I will tell you this, that if you remain faithful, right? If you just keep working on the relationship that you have with the Lord, if you find a place to plug in that seems healthy, that
Yeah.
from your best discernment is relatively healthy, is, you know, no church is perfect. We've said that before. We'll say it a billion times
A
again.
billion times over.
But the thing is, time really does heal those wounds. Um,
Time,
but
understanding,
yeah.
trust, faith, prayer. Truthfully.
And to me, the hardest part of that is just
Yeah.
releasing those things, because I always joke. For the first 6 months of this year, I prayed a lot of imprecatory psalms, right? A lot of David's imprecatory psalms, just
Mm-hmm.
like Lord, smite my enemies, vindicate me,
Mm.
those sorts of things. And those are great prayers to pray, I think, because first off, God knows that you are plotting revenge in your heart. Like, God knows that you got a lot of thoughts
Mm-hmm.
about it. He
Mm-hmm.
knows that I
Mm-hmm.
have elaborate revenge fantasies about ways of sticking it to the people that have wounded me. However, when I
However,
when I choose, and it's a choice, let me tell you, it's a choice. When I choose to go, Lord, I know that this is not beneficial. I want you to do what you know is right. I want you to do what you think is best, not so
yeah,
that I get revenge, but so that you are glorified.
yeah,
Um, I want to be vindicated, but I'm not going to take back the revenge and do it myself. I'm going to allow you in your time and
yeah,
in your way to vindicate me or not.
yeah,
God
yeah.
knows the truth of the situation, and I have gone to God and asked him to deal with me and show me where there is
Mm-hmm.
any wrong in my heart, show me where I have could have done better, could have done differently,
Mm-hmm.
show me all of those things so that I can grow and mature, and I have to leave their actions between them and
Mm-hmm.
God. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
not for me to decide.
It's not for you to decide, and not even for you to worry about, because
Right.
at the end of the day, you have to, in a sense, wash your hands of it.
Right?
Um, you know that there was a Judas situation. You know that God knew that the situation was brewing,
Right?
and so and that's why I was saying like those seeds are so easy to go cross that line from being hurt with the people to just
Exactly.
completely being hurt with God. And that one situation I shared, I mean, like I said, I was at both ends in the same situation
Oh yeah.
because I was hurt by my leader while hurting more sheep by listening to the leader. And then they only see my actions. They're hurt by my actions. And then it's just a snowball of just crazy hurt all around.
Right.
And then what happens is you have one hurt, and then our eyes start seeing everything, and everything starts to
Mhm.
irritate you. Everything
That's the
starts to piss
lens we
you off.
see everything
Everything
through.
is the lens that you see everything through. And so I say it with all sincerity, if you are out there and there is even a tiny ounce of church hurt from anything, one, I would say examine the actual hurt. Was it his people, or did the church, as in the body of Christ, hurt you?
Mhm.
Because people, even though we make up the body of Christ, we are not it completely, because those pieces will break off and spew the venom that is inside of them, just like any infected bone will do. You have one infected bone, that one bone is going to get into your bloodstream and it's going to start infecting other people. So you have to go back. If you go to the beginning of church hurt, somebody got hurt by somebody, then that person hurt somebody, then that person hurt somebody.
Mhm.
And that, so now the body of Christ is infected with all these different things, because now you not only have opinion, you have hurt, you have opinion, you have politics, you have all these different things that are infecting the body. And then being infected, you're hurting your body more when you don't, you know, heal it properly. I share this sometimes when I speak, and I think it's in the book. It's like, you can tell me because I haven't read it in a while. But it's like having a scar that's
Mhm.
having an issue healing, and you just put a band-aid on it. You don't clean out the wound. You don't treat it properly. You don't even put the right bandaging on it. You just see the first band-aid you have and stick it on there. But literally, if you look down at your arm again at this scar, not only is the blood seeping out, but it's moving the band-aid out of the way, because the band-aid is no longer necessary, because everything inside of you that is infected is now spewing out on the outer parts of you. And that's exactly how church does. One person, literally one person got hurt, and now we have generations of people who have walked away from God, who have walked away from ministry because of one person.
Right.
Because it didn't just come out of nowhere.
Right.
And you have to consider the source. I used to think that this wasn't a confidence issue. It wasn't because it doesn't matter. You can be the most, I've seen church hurt knock down the most confident, and the least confident person. It's not about confidence, it's about maturity. And I know for me, I was not even speaking, preaching, teaching, all of that. I wasn't mature enough to always separate my call in that place versus the people and me wanting to be away from them and me, or how long I didn't walk in purpose and my passions because of the hurt I felt from other people and not feeling like it was going to be good enough, because when I tried it in church before, it was like, well, we don't do that like that, and that's really different. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
I'm not just, though some of these are very specific situations to me, but I'm not the only one, because I've heard the same stories in various churches and ministries and people and everything. It's nothing new under the sun, and that's so true. It was funny when you said a decision, and I had to think about it. It takes a decision.
It does.
To be who you're called to be versus who people are telling you are. And when you are allowing church hurt to get that deep, bitter seed inside of you, you're letting that hurt define you. You're letting it be who you are versus truly who you are.
Right. And let's be very clear. If you have experienced church hurt, if you're listening to this and you've been hurt by the church and people have behaved badly, that is not, you did not cause that. It is not your responsibility. You did not earn it. There is nothing that you have done to earn church hurt, generally speaking, right? None of us earn anything. We may contribute to our own pain in certain situations. We may make bad situations worse, but no one earns being hurt by the church or the people in a church. Like, that's not something you earn or deserve, right? And so want to make that really clear. Like
Very.
we're not saying that. The hard part for me about being a person of faith is that I recognize that I may not be responsible for other people's bad actions, right? I'm not responsible for people acting a fool and doing stupid stuff and not acting in a Christ-like manner and all of those things. I'm not responsible for that. I didn't cause it. It's not my responsibility to have anything to do with that. However, where my responsibility lies is in my reaction. And the hardest part for me of walking in faith is parsing out my reaction to things, right? Because we all get triggered by stuff, right?
Right.
And like, I am someone who historically as a child had a lot of anger issues and I had a hot temper. I know how to use words real good, right? I know how to be hot and get hot quickly and just 0 to 100 and eviscerate someone with the words that I say. But as a woman of faith, as someone who claims the name of Christ, I can't be that way and I can't do that. And so when I react to something, even though it would have been, it would be okay because I was triggered by someone ostensibly, right? It's not okay because God calls me to a standard that has nothing to do with the reactions or the behaviors of other people, right? God is not, when God deals with me, he doesn't deal with me, the answer, well, they did it first is not, is not a great answer in the kingdom of God. Now, that's not to say that God doesn't understand and feel our hurt and care about our hurt. That's not what he's saying. He's just saying, look, you're responsible for how you behave. Like, I want you to be mature in your faith. I want you to trust me above all other things. I want you to put your faith and your hope in me and not in the behavior of other people for validation, for acceptance, for all of those things. And that's hard because fundamentally I'm pretty sure that all of humanity is essentially toddlers, and we're all essentially going, but he did it on purpose. It wasn't an accident. He did it on purpose, kind of one of those things. And the reality is, it doesn't really matter.
No.
We all have a responsibility to respond appropriately. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I had a piano student today who literally started throwing a fit because the song was too hard, like fell off the bench and was like ready to go into full tantrum mode. And I was like, you need to find a more appropriate way to express your frustration with this. This is not an appropriate way
Right.
to express that.
Right. This is
And
not it.
and fundamentally, I'm not very much different than him because I'm going to come down off my bench and throw my metaphorical hissy fit
Mm-hmm.
because I was hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and hurt people hurt people. Going back to what you
It's
said,
so cliche and so real at the same
right?
time.
Hurt people hurt people. Somewhere we have to stop that cycle.
Yeah.
And the person who hurt you clearly is not going to stop that cycle
So
because,
don't allow that cycle to become
right?
you.
Like
Mm-hmm.
what is our part in it? And
Yeah.
one of the best pieces of marriage advice that I ever got was from Tim Keller's book. I think it's called Marriage. I think it's just called Marriage. Great book. Highly recommend. If you're not married, go out and read it before you get married.
Mm.
If you're married, read it. There are two books that were completely transformative for me in terms of understanding marriage relationships, but has really helped me just in general spiritual maturity as well. One of which is Marriage by Tim Keller. The other one is Love and Respect by Emerson Eggerichs. Two
Mm.
fantastic books. Highly recommend them. But one of the things that Tim Keller talks about in that book is that God, we no longer have the option in marriage of pretending that our actions don't affect somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
because our
Mm-hmm.
actions immediately affect somebody else, this other person
Affects
that's
someone
right up
else. Yeah.
next to you, right? This
Yeah.
that's reflecting back everything that you do. And
Mm-hmm.
our marriage is designed to make us holy, and all of our relationships are designed to make us holy. And
Mm-hmm.
holiness
Mm-hmm.
only comes when we allow ourselves to go through a refining process.
Right.
And when there are arguments and when there are disagreements and when there are problems, again, you are not responsible. Nothing is ever 100% 0%,
Right.
right?
Right.
Now, some things can be 99 and 1 for sure.
True.
And
True.
what I mean by that is, look, we are responsible for our own actions within relationships. We are responsible to respond without sin.
Yeah.
Like, right? And that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, when
Yeah.
we respond to hurt or whatever, like, we are responsible to not sin in that.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no excuse for that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We can be hurt. And we can mess up, and that happens, and we need to make amends in those situations. But we do have a responsibility to not sin out of our hurt and not sin out of our anger and not
And it's so
sin.
easy to do.
It's so easy to do. And so,
I've been there, so I know it's super easy to do.
I play back the conversation I had with my former lead pastor, and I recognized that I did not behave well in that moment. Don't think that what I necessarily said was incorrect. I feel like
It's just maybe the how.
it was the how it was delivered, and it didn't necessarily benefit anyone or anything. I mean, I felt a little bit better afterwards, but it was short lived, because ultimately I thought, Jess, you should have been better than that. You should have been the mature one, And so
Yeah,
I guess
it's the beating ourselves up on certain things that also goes along with everything, basically.
But I think the other thing with that too is, like, when we beat ourselves up like that, I think that's the moment when we have to recognize, okay, have I learned this lesson?
Mm-hmm.
Will I know next time not to say X and Y and Z out of anger?
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully.
Fingers crossed, everyone.
Fingers crossed. No guarantees.
Right. I was just thinking, like, I could give so many examples, but one thing I want of my own personal experiences and different things, and how I can look at them now and see how I allowed the bitterness of that seed to keep growing for as long as it did for a lot of them. So what I want to share with you now is basically, when you feel like this is happening in your life, what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I'm going to always tell you to do is pray first.
Right.
pray and try to see if you can get an answer from God. But also, because Jessica mentioned this earlier, you need to release, you need to get it out. You need to talk to someone, wise
Mm-hmm.
counsel. We will always talk about going to therapists and different things. This is the one situation where I would say, if you're going to talk to a therapist about it, talk to a Christian therapist specifically
Absolutely.
in this situation. Any other
It's unique.
situation, I would just tell you to just go to therapy. But for this particular thing, I would suggest um, a Christian therapist or someone in ministry. I had a situation in my life a few years back when I wasn't a church hurt situation, but it was a place where I hurt some other people. But I was also again hurt in the process because I was dealing with my hurt of hurting.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, I've always been someone who's extremely sensitive. So when I hurt someone, even if I slightly did it intentionally, if I realize that that's something hurt them, I am
Mm-hmm.
extremely hurt. And so I wasn't sure who to talk to at the time. And this is before I actually talked to Jessica about some things. He led me to a person, and she was someone else in ministry. She wasn't my pastor. She wasn't even a pastor here in Los Angeles area. She was not even in California right now. When I called her, I said, "Hey, this is going on. I need to talk," and she counseled me through with the leading of the Holy Spirit for what I needed in that moment. So, prayer, some form of
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
wise counsel, or Christian therapy, and then also journaling it out. Also, recognize it's important to recognize where your part is, because not saying you deserve hurt, because that's not it. But now, how can you move forward? And hopefully, with the first two things, that you can start to get to that process, because the last thing, of course, is heal. You have to heal. I would say,
Mm-hmm.
even if you're working in ministry and you've been hurt, I would say heal before you start working in any area of ministry again, even if it's in the area where you were already previously working. I say that from experience, because I functioned in ministry and hurt, and I was just bleeding on the people who didn't deserve it.
Mm. Mm.
And so if you are in ministry, even if you just run the nursery, you know what I'm saying? Like, even if you are the coffee shop person, even if no no part of ministry is not just teaching and preaching, and we will say that all the time on here.
Amen.
Um, it's every aspect of that makes ministry grow and move forward and makes it flow. You need a camera person, you need a light person, you need a sound person, you need someone that's going to stand at the door and smile and say, "Welcome to Libbity Block
Absolutely.
Ministry." So even if you've been hurt and you're in those areas, don't minimalize it. But as you heal, take a sabbatical from it. That's my personal suggestion. Take a few weeks at least off. It don't have to be 30 days. It don't have to be 60 days. It could be a couple weeks. Or if God tells you to go longer, do what He's calling you to do. But heal before you get back, because it's as you're healing, you're still tender, and that tenderness can go either way. It can make you overly sensitive to the situation, or it can start letting that bitterness creep back in. So those are my suggestions on how to begin to the process of getting through and moving past it. And I'll always remember, anybody that's walking on this earth that has blood in their bodies, they're human, and we as humans, even the most unintentional
Right.
and innocent people, can cause someone to be hurt over something. Even the way I could say hello to Jessica 5 different ways, but if one of the hellos came off like I was aggressive and pissed off, that can mess up her whole entire day.
Mm-hmm.
And she can allow that to grow and grow and grow. And then it cuts our partnership. And then I'm looking a year later, like, what happened? It was because you said hello that fifth time and we didn't address it.
Right. I think so much of it is about finding balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Finding the balance between um, dealing with your hurt, but not marinating in your hurt.
Yeah.
Finding the balance between um, making amends for when you
Mm-hmm.
have hurt someone,
Mm-hmm.
but also not taking responsibility for things that aren't yours to take responsibility for, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so much of balance, right? And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that is faith, and not to be too zen in it, because that's not what I mean. But like there is a sense of balance. It's the balance between pursuing holiness and living in grace,
Yeah.
right? It's the balance between living in freedom, but not using that as an excuse to go out and do whatever you want. So much of our faith is about finding that balance and that line, and that space where we are in balance in our faith. And I think that church hurt is another one of those situations, right? Because we could very easily become embittered in our pain. We could become distant from God and from his church in our pain, as this kind of knee-jerk response, like, no, I don't want to be there anymore. I'm leaving. I'm taking my toys and going home kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or we could dive right back in and not give ourselves, the proper time to be restored and be healed and process what we've been through,
Right.
So I think it's just a matter of finding that balance in it. But ultimately, it goes back to what you said. The first and most important step is making that connection with God and not allowing that connection with God to be severed just because the bride was not beautiful that day. Right? The bride of Christ is not always beautiful. Sometimes she's ugly. And that's going to happen because
we're not making excuses for people's behavior. Please understand.
Yeah. No, this is not absolving anybody of anything.
No, we just want you to start, if you're dealing with it, we want you to start becoming at peace with it, because it's hurting you more than it's hurting anyone else at this point. Because those people that hurt you have moved on with their lives. They probably even hurt somebody else at this point.
Right. Don't let them take up rental space in your head.
Right. And this can really apply to any situation of hurt. It doesn't have to be a church hurt. It could be a relationship. It could be a job. It could be family. It could be any of that. Anything that is causing you to not fully be the person that you were created to be in your head. It's not, and I don't mean that in just your job and your purpose, but in your happiness, in your love, in your life, in your relationship with God and others. If you're not yourself, then those things and people are taking place in your life in a place that is taking up real estate that doesn't belong to you. Those are definitely weights that you don't need to carry. You have the opportunity to release it and let it go.
Absolutely. And as always, we just encourage you to find a good counselor, good Christian counselor. Yep. If you have questions about any of this, we've got opportunities for you to connect with us about it.
Absolutely.
You can go to our website, joyandjess.com, and there is a space for you to ask questions. And record a video message, and we can address that in a future episode. You can also DM us. We're on Instagram at @WeDigress_Joy_Jess.
Get in those DMs. That sounded terrible, but I just wanted to say that.
We don't need anybody to slide in. Just, a nice gentle knock is good. But
gentle knock.
That sounded
like always a great VBS phrase.
Right. We're on Facebook. We are on Instagram. All those links are at joyandjess.com as well. But we know that church hurt is a big topic, and we've really only scratched the surface of it. We took too much time talking about the Tonys, we know. But
we're sorry, guys.
Right. We didn't even dive into the tea between Adina Menzel and Kristen Chenoweth. We know there's some there, but
yeah.
Right. Maybe they need this episode too for how to get over all that. But at any rate,
and we all need to remember that a person's a person, no matter how small.
It's true. True story. Thanks so much for listening, guys. We appreciate you. And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thanks for listening. Check us out on the web at joyandjess.com. That's JoyandJess.com. We'll see you next week.